Right now, let me reintroduce my guest one more time. Charles Kanjama, advocate of the High Court, is with us in studio. Thank you for making time. And Dr. Alex Awiti, public policy expert as well, is also with us in studio. Keep your views coming on 22422 at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag NEWSNIGHT. Like Onesimus here says, from Meru, says the president is really doing what Kenyans have been waiting for him to do for a long time. And that's where we start, Dr. Alex, and I'll start with you now. What kind of message was the president sending to the nation after this reshuffle, from your view?
I think this is a very interesting moment. The president probably has the last iteration to reorganize government, and that was the headline of his conversation. He said that the purpose of this process is to reorganize government. Yeah. And you see far-reaching changes in agriculture, in trade and industrialization, and we see changes also in the Ministry of Youth. There's now the youth department that has been moved to ICT. And the other part of this whole process is what he calls the trainee ministers, the young Kenyans who have been elevated to positions of chief administrative secretaries. So I think that's kind of like the ballpark within which we should view these changes. I think one of the other important points to take away from this, if you kind of move away from the politics, is the fact that three major elements of the big four are implicated in these changes. You see far-reaching changes to try and reorganize health. You see far-reaching changes to organize agriculture and food security, and far-reaching changes in terms of the reorganization of the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade, to now include enterprise development. And these are big elements that we think are critical to moving the country forward. And I think the key message the president is passing is that we need to get back to work. We're 2 years out of an election, and this fast-paced electioneering mood, I think, has to stop, and we have to pause and get the job done. He has not enough time to back around in politics.
Kanjama, is that your reading as well, that it's time to get back to work?
I'm not sure, because the president naturally does not give explanations for why he's made certain cabinet changes or reshuffles. So it is left to onlookers to speculate. I think it is an optimistic reading that indeed he wants people to get back to work. And for sure, the president is focused on his legacy. These are his legacy years, and he would like to keep the focus there. But there has been also a lot of commentary and discussion on the question of BBI, on the question of apparent political divisions or alignments in his own cabinet. I find the changes, even though they seem to be making people fit into slots which they may be more suitable, are not really very far-reaching. You'd expect that a president who's focused on his legacy would view this as his last major chance to make changes that would enable him secure his legacy. So it seems to be a mixed bag between efficiency changes as well as trying to align matters politically and remove some distractions from the cabinet. The question would be, has he succeeded?
Yeah, and that's a question that I'll actually pose to Dr. Alex Awiti as well, because many people think that he was just appeasing his backyard by this raft of changes there, and it was not necessarily because of the issue of getting back to work. It was just because there's been an uproar from his backyard, and now he's trying to appease them by also nominating and kicking some of them out.
Well, I guess as Charles says, there is the administrative action the president has taken. And he said himself, and I'm not putting words in his mouth, that he's trying to reorganize government. And he said many times that we have to focus on delivering on the promises that he made to the people. I think the question is around the optics and the context of all of these changes. The country is on an electioneering footing, which is unfortunate, and I think a lot of it has been occasioned and exacerbated by the BBI conversation. So everything's going to be looked at against that lens. I think, for instance, everybody thinks that Kiunjuri is a victim because he's come out up front saying that he's on the deputy president's side.
Is he not?
Well, I don't know. That's what he says. He said that he's the most reliable soldier. He just said that on the clip that you played earlier. So how we read that soldier in whose army is a matter of of debate, and I think Kenyans will be talking about that. So I think really it's the lens that Kenyans went in a highly polarized political environment. People are going to read more into the politics behind the president's action rather than what he intends to do. So the president is a victim of the moment at which he's making this decision. So I guess part of the question is, what is the presidential communications wing going to do to reposition and reclaim the conversation around what Kanjama says these are the last few moments of to actually reset and firmly institute his agenda going forward, but also start to think about his legacy years. I think what he's done basically is look at the changes that he's suggesting. He's proposing for agriculture organization of cooperatives, for instance. He's paying out farmers in who are growing rice, farmers in coffee, and I think basically he says he wants to put money back into farmers' pockets and the pockets of the citizens. So I guess the question really is, how do Kenyans want to read this, and how do we as the people begin to put pressure on the president's cabinet to basically deliver on this huge agenda? I think the Big Four basically implicate all of us. We all succeed as a country if we meet these Big Four agenda obligations. So I guess the politics basically gets in the way of a lot of conversations.
But Kanjama, from where you stand, is reshuffling the right move? Because some people are arguing that if you're incompetent in one ministry, moving you to another won't help.
I think for those who are incompetent, firing is the right move. But the moment you drop even one or two cabinet secretaries, you have to do a reshuffle because you have to fill the slots, and sometimes directly appointing someone from outside the cabinet to a slot that has become vacant may not be very appropriate because certain slots are sensitive. And then also you may have someone who's been promoted, so to speak, to their level of incompetence, and so they're not doing well in one ministry, but they may do better in another ministry because of their temperament or their background and so on. So sometimes reshuffling also does help to bring out competencies in certain ministers who may not be performing well. They may have reached a bottleneck in dealing with stakeholders in another ministry. So really, the president knows his people very well. He's engaging the cabinet secretaries on a weekly basis. These people he's appointed to cabinet from outside are people he knows. Some of them have been in senior positions in his government. So we expect that he has good reasons for doing it. The tradition is that the president will not comment on specific reasons for specific changes. And he made that quip that if I have not mentioned a particular name, then you should assume that that person is not in the cabinet, which means 3 of the cabinet secretaries, 2 who are serving, 1 who was suspended, Rotich, have formally been dropped.
Does that essentially now mean that his fate is sealed because the case has not been concluded yet from the corridors of justice?
From the track record of what has happened in the past, the moment these cabinet secretaries are suspended and then dropped from the cabinet, they rarely make a comeback. Of course, that doesn't foreclose the possibility if the case ends in his favor of him making a comeback. But I think it was such a major move when Minister Rotich or Cabinet Secretary Rotich was suspended. It was such a major move. There are such major allegations against him that it is likely that the president will not reappoint him even if the case was to end. Keep in mind also that these corruption cases take time. There's a possibility of appeal. And so those are some, and they are the optics.
They do take time, Kanjama, but should the outcome go to his favor, is there a chance then that he can counter him being put aside? Because he's not essentially been fired. Uhuru has just been confirmed in a docket that was supposed to be his.
I think from the time of Kibaki's government, what we've seen is that suspended ministers never make a comeback within the same term of when they were suspended.
No matter the outcome of the case.
Yes, yes. And I think partly is because there's also a perception that once you are tainted by being charged in court, I don't think it's a right argument because there's a presumption of innocence, but there's that perception that once you've been tainted, that politically you may not want to be seen to be bringing back such a person. So this, of course, is speculation. We don't know what will happen in the next 1 or 2 years. We wait to see.
Okay. Dr. Witi, from your political reading, what is it about Kiunjuri that essentially sealed his fate? And what is it about Peter Munya that now makes him the favorite one for this docket?
Well, I guess if you go back to last year when, in June, when MPs were actually suggesting that he should somehow resign from his docket on 1.8 billion, which was paid in advance for maize importation from the strategic grain reserve. I think that's when his problems began.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the conversations now around reorganization of the Ministry of Agriculture, for instance, revamping, bringing cooperatives back, basically trying to institute mechanisms for rapid payment to farmers and reaching out to farmers across the country. The president basically saying he wants to put money back in into farmers' pockets. But agriculture is a very complex ministry, and again, it's one of those things that devolution has left in some kind of a hanging status. You have farmers out in the field, you have governors trying to do all kinds of things with farm preparation, farm implements. The input side of things is still subsidized by the government. Extension basically is comatose, and we've basically moved into semi-commercialization and subsistence. Smallholder farmers who basically produce most of the food are in some kind of purgatory when it comes to kind of policy structures that support those smallholders.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it's going to be any easier for Munya, for Mr. Munya. There are far-reaching reforms that we still need. We've been through several iterations of strategic reorganization of the Ministry of Agriculture. We've not got it right. Many countries haven't. But I think that should not detract us from the hard, honest work to basically reorganize agriculture. So my suggestion to Mr. Munya is basically not to assume that Mr. Kiunjuri basically failed, but to go back to some of those potential structural impediments within the ministry that actually require real reorganization to move things forward. And food security is one of the major planks that President Kenyatta has put forth as part of his legacy agenda.
Yeah, but is there any particular formula that could appease everyone else? Because no matter who he nominates, at some point someone will complain that my person was not there, our people were not there. Is there a particular formula that the president can use to appease everyone?
But you know, Trevor, what I don't really understand is why we appropriate cabinet appointments and make these somehow ethnic community kind of interest issues. At the end of the day, the president is making an appointment of an individual to deliver on a very specific government agenda. The individual goes in there and is fully accountable for what they do or what they don't do. And I don't see how the community or the tribe or the region benefits from these kinds of appointments. I think it's just a perception, and it's something that has been with us for a very long time, but we haven't really questioned, in real terms. How does a cabinet appointment of an individual from your village benefit you as a person? I think we need to rethink some of these political kind of regional sectoral interest formulations around cabinet or individual appointments.
Even though we've also seen that some of those appointments, sometimes the same person is taken from the same region because they're trying to toe that line. And what does that do to merit leadership?
Well, I guess in this case, as you had in the clip before, people from Kiunjuri's bucket are basically saying that docket was theirs and now it's been moved to Meru or wherever Munya comes from. But I think it's just nonsensical. I think basically we want to create a merit-based society where individuals, as long as they're Kenyan citizens, it doesn't matter where they come from or how many of them from the same community are in government. It's about providing services to Kenyans and not people's last names or their communities. And we should stop this idea of our man or a person or a woman has been demoted or promoted, for instance.
All right. And Kanjama, finally from
Trevor,
me.
Let me first say that one of the reasons I think why there is so much emphasis on this issue of diversity is that the Constitution itself keeps mentioning regional and ethnic diversity. And I think the current thinking about inclusivity is that merit-based arguments sometimes are used to exclude people from certain communities. So the concept of affirmative action precisely means that you have to have a balance. I remember President Daniel Moi, with all his the things he was criticized against, always made an effort to try and balance at least to have a sense of representation. A cabinet is both executive and body, and also represents the face of Kenya. So I think that even though there tends to be criticism, one challenge the president faces when he does a reshuffle is that he still wants to retain that diversity. Could be gender diversity, could be ethnic or regional diversity, it could even be age-based diversity, and so on. So some of these issues, even though they are soft issues, become important political considerations for the president, or indeed anyone who's making a reshuffle.
All right. And finally from me, and we're running out of time here, for any action, there will be a reaction. You keep it cool, I'll keep it cool. Verbatim from Kiunjuri. What do you think, Kanjama? Can that be a threat or a warning?
I think that is something that requires political analysis. What I would
so it was it to Alex Awiti.
What I would say is that the president has the absolute right to hire and fire cabinet secretaries. The fact that he doesn't give the reason doesn't mean that there isn't a reason. And the reason may be political, it may be based on efficiency or other reasons. Really, he's the one who's been elected by Kenyans to serve for 5 years. And he can set up the cabinet whichever way he thinks will make it possible for him to accomplish the goals that he promised Kenyans.
All right, Awiti, what do you think? Very briefly.
Well, I think there's just Kiunjuri's kind of exit rumination. I don't understand why he would take it personal. These are political appointments, and the president has the prerogative to appoint and to revoke those appointments. So in his case, I guess what he should have said is just a word of gratitude and to thank Kenyans for the opportunity to serve.
Okay. All right, thanks for making time this evening, Charles Kanjama, Advocate of the High Court, and Dr. Alex Awiti, Public Policy Expert, for that conversation. Let's see what you're saying online and the reaction from 22422 and also Twitter handles. Dr. Paul Kibicho says it is the prerogative of the president to hire or fire. Those who don't deliver, lukewarm, indecisive, incompetent should face the sack. Results is what every employer focuses on. All right, let's see another one here. It's online as well. Chris Munene says it is deemed insubordination to always digress from the very authority that installed you. Nevertheless, he stands a better chance to prove his service to Kenyans if indeed he was working. All right, let's see another one here as well. Use the hashtag NEWSNIGHT. Agumba Kagumba says today's president address has clearly revealed that irrespective of the politics related to BBI, he is still committed to uniting the nation. Furthermore, he's shown he's not interested in the corrupt and non-performing lads. All right, let's see what you're saying on 22422. That's our SMS line. Kindly tell us your name and where you're texting from, like comment from Eldoret. He says if indeed the changes are geared towards enhanced service delivery to Kenyans, then it is a new year gift to all of us. Ordinary citizens are facing very harsh times, and their priority is tangible policy interventions. All right, there's another one here. Farah from Maralal says the president's fight against corruption should be given full support by all Kenyans, as corruption has become worse than cancer and derails development and services to the Mwananchi. Therefore, we are all duty bound to fight the menace, period. All right, we'll sample some of your views as well at the end of this show, but there's a lot coming up, including